Hey guys, my name is Gabby, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing another if you like this book, I think you would also like this book recommendations kind of video. And I have made this kind of recommendations video a few times in the past. I think this is either my 4th or 5th or maybe even 6th time doing this kind of thing. So I will be linking down below all the previous times that I've done this if you want to check those out. But I do think that this is a really great way to recommend books because I think if there's something really particular that you liked in a certain book, it's really cool to know other books that have those particular things, whether they're plot lines or really interesting writing or just kind of quirky characters that feel similar to me. These are just books that I think have things in common with other books. Speaking of the writing in these books, I do feel like the writing of a book can really make or break the story for me, so really good writing is really important to me, and I think that's why I've decided to start working on my own writing lately, and I've been able to do that thanks to Skillshare. I have been taking some creative writing classes again through Skillshare, and the one that I wanted to recommend that I've been taking is this one called Creative Writing for All, a 10-day journaling challenge, and it's taught by Emily Gold, and it's a really cool class because it's definitely gotten me into wanting to journal more and try to write every day more, and it's really pushed myself to do that, which I really appreciate. Skillshare is an online learning community that empowers you to accomplish real growth. It's a really affordable way for you to explore your creativity and learn something new because an annual subscription is less than $10 per month. So especially when compared to some other classes and workshops that you can take, it's definitely affordable. And there's such a wide variety of different class topics that they offer for creative people, like photography, animation, digital art, marketing, music, film, nearly anything that you can think of, they probably have a class for. I really would like to push myself to learn a new creative skill in the year of 2020, and they have so many different classes that sound interesting to me. There's this one class I'm actually really interested in taking, and it's called Introduction to Book Cover Design, Making Stories Visual. And that one sounds super cool, and I've always been fascinated by what goes behind designing book covers. And then there's also this other class that I just started watching called Going Viral, Write, Film, and Make Content That People Share. That one is very cool. It's always interesting to learn how to market yourself online, and I don't know, I've just always been fascinated with those kinds of things. So the first 500 subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 2-month free trial of the premium membership so that you can also explore your creativity. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel, and I'm really happy to inform you guys about them because they are truly a company that I think is doing something exceptional, and education is something that I really value, especially as an aspiring writer, so I am happy to work with them. So definitely make sure you click that link in the description to go and get your free trial started and check out some of their classes that they provide because I'm sure there's something for everyone, and I'm sure you're going to find a class that you really want to take. Alright, so moving right along, let's just go ahead and jump into the book recommendations for today. So my very first one is going to be, if you liked Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, I think you would also like The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, because I feel like these books are two extremely hyped thrillers right now, and I do feel like they have kind of similar plot lines because in Lock Every Door, it's about a girl that's going to be getting paid to house sit at this apartment building that's this creepy, cursed, kind of spooky apartment building. And then in The Turn of the Key, it's about this girl who's gonna go nanny for this family, and she's gonna be living in the house that's also kind of spooky and haunted and weird. In both of these books, I feel like there's just this very spooky atmosphere. There's this question of what's paranormal and what's real, and I feel like they're both very solid thrillers. I love both of them so dearly. They are definitely my 2 favorite thrillers that I read in 2019, and I just feel like they're very similar to each other. At least the spooky vibe that I got from both of these are very similar, so I would definitely recommend checking one out if you haven't read the other. If you liked Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, I think you might also like The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. I do feel like these main characters feel so similar to me, and Kath is a main character that I identify with more than any other character that I've ever read in fiction because she's a young aspiring writer who's really close to her sister, who is just an awkward turtle and doesn't know how to talk to people, and so I just really related to her for that. And then I feel like Nina Hill in The Bookish Life of Nina Hill is kind of an adult version of Kath. At least that's like the vibe that I got, because Nina is also definitely very awkward. She doesn't enjoy social situations. She'd rather be at home reading. I think the main difference between these two characters is that Kath is definitely more of a writer as opposed to a reader, but she also does really love the Simon Snow series. Like, she's an avid reader of that series, but she also writes fan fiction for that series. So I do think she cares a bit more about writing than reading, but Nina Hill is definitely all about reading. But I just related to these two characters so hard, and they just reminded me a lot of each other with like their awkward quirks and things. And they both involve these really like soft as shit romances, like that you're just like, that's so cute and it's so soft and innocent and sweet. And my next recommendation is going to be, if you liked All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood, I think you should also check out Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma, and vice versa, because I feel like both of these books are about some extremely controversial things. So if you are okay with reading about extremely controversial things and you're willing to keep an open mind about things, I think that both of these books are very hard-hitting and so incredibly hard to read about. They're just some of the most beautiful, gorgeous stories that I've ever read, and they've both stayed on my mind for so long after I finished them. And if you didn't know, Forbidden is actually a love story, like a romance between a brother and a sister. There's more behind it than that, but essentially that's what this book is about. And I know that these books both have premises that you're probably going to cringe when you hear what they're about, but if you're willing to like open your mind and just give it a chance to see what these characters' lives are like, then I think you would really appreciate these stories. And All the Ugly and Wonderful Things is about this older man in his 20s that gets in a romantic relationship with a 13-year-old girl. So again, these books aren't going to be for everyone, and I know that they're like immediate cringe when you hear those descriptions, but at the same time, like, these stories have really stuck on my mind through the years, and I just feel like they're both very hard-hitting, hard-to-read subject matter. And I just think that these books are both generally so sad and depressing, and some of the saddest books that I've ever read. And my next one is going to be, if you like The Shining by Stephen King, I think you would also like Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. These are two horror novels that just remind me a lot of each other. I was reading Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky last year, and I kept thinking, like, this writing reminds me so much of like the classic old Stephen King storytelling style. And so I think honestly, if you liked any of Stephen King's old horror novels, I think you would enjoy Imaginary Friend, but especially The Shining, because there's just so many things in this book that reminded me of The Shining. Like the fact that we're mainly following this like little boy, like Danny Torrance in The Shining, and then we're following Christopher in Imaginary Friend, and most of the paranormal creepy shit is happening to the kid in these stories. And there's also the use of like a number that's very present and repetitive in both of these stories that I found very similar. Like in The Shining, it's room 217. It even has it on the cover because of how much of a significant part of the story it is. And then it doesn't happen until a little bit later on in this book, but there's also this number that comes up again and again. Both of these books are some of my favorite horror books of all time. Like, I definitely think Imaginary Friend, like, I do have issues with it. I think it's way too long. I think the ending of the book is really terrible, but it's still one of my favorites of all time, and I just love both of these books so much, and they're both great horror vibes. Alright, my next one is going to be, if you liked The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I know this one's popping up again. I think you might also like Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I know that it might seem strange because this one is a thriller and then this one is like a magical realism contemporary kind of book, but I feel like both of these books are interesting because they both follow a nanny who has to take care of these kind of demonic, crazy children that something's going on. And in The Turn of the Key, this is done in a very like thriller-esque way where the kids are just very demonic and she's left alone with them very early on and she has to figure out what to do. And on top of that, the house is also very paranormal and spooky, and oh my god, this book is just all around so great and so fun. But then in Nothing to See Here, this is like a contemporary magical realism kind of story where this nanny gets left with these kids who light on fire when they get mad. And even though the kids aren't really demonic themselves, it's just such a fascinating situation to see this nanny dealing with these kids who are literally lighting on fire. Like, can you even imagine? Like, what? And so I just feel like these books are both similar in the sense that they both deal with a nanny who has to deal with these crazy, impossible situations with these kids that they're nannying for. And so I do think, too, if you've ever been a nanny, then you might have a different kind of appreciation for either of these books. My next recommendation is going to be if you liked One Day in December by Josie Silver, I think you would also like In 5 Years by Rebecca Surley. These just reminded me a lot of each other, and I think the main reason is that these books both span a long period of time, and they're both like contemporary romance kind of stories. And in One Day in December, I believe the book spans like 10 years, I want to say, and it mainly follows between these two girls that are like best friends, and then they kind of end up falling for the same guy in a way, and then it kind of like has an effect on their friendship. It kind of reminds me of that movie Something Borrowed, honestly, like it's just like that. And then in 5 Years, we follow this girl who wakes up 5 years into the future and her life is completely different, and she's trying to figure out what about her life had changed to make it so different. In this story, we also follow two very close female best friends, and then they also kind of somehow get involved with the same guy, and it's like awkward and weird. And I just feel like because of that, these like love triangle kind of situations with the two girls that are best friends is very, very similar, and I loved both of them very much for those reasons. Like, these were both 4-star books for me. Like, they weren't anything like absolutely exceptional or anything, but they were definitely very heartfelt and interesting. And I think I did enjoy In 5 Years slightly more than One Day in December. Like, I don't know. Really enjoyed both, and I think if you liked the premise of one, then you would really enjoy the other too. Alright, so my next one is going to be if you liked the book Far From the Tree by Robin Benway, I think you would also like the book The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand. The main reason for this is that these are both young adult contemporary novels that have to deal with adoption in some way. So in Far From the Tree, I can't remember if we're following 3 random kids who are dealing with different adoptions or if we're following 3 siblings. I believe it's 3 siblings that we're following in Far From the Tree, and we're seeing how they all are dealing with adoption differently. And it's like very sad and very like hard-hitting, and it kind of shows like how awful the adoption process can be sometimes and how you might end up in foster care or something like that, and it's like very sad in this book. But then in The How and the Why, I feel like this book is the flip side of adoption, where it shows like how great it can turn out, because our main character has these 2 incredible, amazing parents who love her so much, and she's kind of just starting to get curious about her birth mother. And I do think The How and the Why like simultaneously manages to be a really hard-hitting and sad book, but also really happy and really positive and warm at the same time. So I really, really enjoyed both. I do think The How and the Why is a book that I enjoyed a little bit more. Like, I just connected to the main character a lot more in this one, but I definitely did enjoy both stories. It's just been a couple years since I read Far From the Tree, so that's why my memory is like a little bit fuzzy on it, but I do think that they're very similar. Alright, and the very last one that I have is if you like Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, I think you would also like Darling Rose Gold by Stephanie Robel. Both of these books are thrillers that deal with mother-daughter relationships specifically. And in Darling Rose Gold, this story is about this mother who's been poisoning her daughter for her whole life. The mother just recently went to prison for 5 years for it, and then this story actually happens when the mom is getting released from prison 5 years later, and she's moving back in with her daughter. And then in Sharp Objects, we get this story about this girl named Camille, who's a reporter. She goes back to her hometown when there's these like very suspicious murders of these teenage girls happening, and she has to go back and live with her mom during the time that she's staying back in her hometown. And her relationship with her mom is just so strained and like horrible and awkward to read about, and it just reminded me a lot of the mother-daughter relationship from Darling Rose Gold for so many reasons. I just feel like these books very much have this similar vibe. Like, I will say Sharp Objects is a lot darker of a book than Darling Rose Gold. Like, I mean, they're both dark in their own sense, but I feel like Sharp Objects is darker in the sense that it's much harder to read about, and there's a lot of trigger warnings for things like cutting and like suicidal thoughts and things like that in this book, where it's just not present in this book. So I do feel like this one is a lot easier to read on your stomach, if you know what I mean. Because Sharp Objects was a lot at times. Like, I wasn't even sure if I could handle this, to be honest. Both of these books do just have very similar thriller vibes to me, so I feel like if you did enjoy one, I think you would really enjoy the other. Alright, so those are all the books that I think are similar to some other books. If you agree, then please let me know, or if you have some other books that you think are also kind of similar to these books that I mentioned in this video, then please let me know. And yeah, I really do love making these kinds of videos. Like, I don't know why, I just love finding similarities between two books that I read and recommending them because of those similarities. I just think it's really fun. And yeah, thank you so much for watching as always. Please do go check out Skillshare, and thank you so much to Skillshare once again for sponsoring this video. It's very exciting for me and I really do appreciate it. And I do genuinely think Skillshare is such a wonderful service. Education is something that's really important to me. So I think it's wonderful and I can't wait to check out more of their classes. And thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you guys very soon with a new video.